It's the Full Court Press with Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker.
Welcome back to the to the show that we're doing right now.
Following the local teams, breaking down the biggest games with in-depth analysis and team interview. Join the show by calling into 435-752-1069 or text 435-339-0321. It's the Full Court Press.
Sproles, ends it. Yes! Touchdown! They did it!
Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. Another edition of the Full Court Press special podcast edition. Eric Frandsen, Jason Walker, and we got high school hoops, high school playoffs going on. So we got another game on the schedule that happens right when the Full Court Press normally would take place. So we thought there's too much important stuff going on to not have something. So we're producing another podcast, special edition podcast here on our podcast feed on 1069fm.com or not 1069 FM, 1069thefan.com or the 1069 The Fan mobile app. But mostly focusing today on Utah State, San Diego State facing each other Saturday in the Spectrum. Big showdown between two of the top traditional powers, top teams out of the Mountain West. It'll be a little bit later game, but we thought we would still shed our own light, if you will, our own preview on what's going on with this matchup between the Aggies and the Aztecs. And a little bit later on in the podcast, you'll hear from Coach Calhoun himself, giving his own previews and what he thinks of the matchups and the storylines, what's happened in between the last time these two teams met each other, because there's a lot that's happened. Aggies opened up kind of early on in the conference slate against San Diego State, and now here we are near the back end of the conference schedule, and they face each other again. So, Jason, this is a matchup that usually San Diego State is in the running to be at or near the top of the league. This year, it's been a bit of a struggle for them. They're currently in, fifth place in the standings? They're tied for third.
Yeah, they're in a tie with Colorado State for third. So, but it has been a struggle. We've not seen the same dominance from San Diego State, at least overall. Their defense is still there. They are still the elite defense that we're all used to seeing from San Diego State. And the high-end capability of San Diego State is also there. They had, a win over Houston. Mind you, that San Diego State is like their fans are still hearkening back to that Houston win as like proof of how good they are. And say, look, you have to look at the win at Houston. It's like, okay. But in conference play, they've lost about as many of the key games as they've won. In fact, they've probably lost more of those key games than they've won. They lost at home to Utah State. They lost to New Mexico. They lost at home to UNLV. They lost at Colorado State. They do have a pair of wins over Boise State, and they win over Colorado State. So they won at home against Colorado State, lost on the road to the Rams. So they've got some decent wins in their pocket, but they have an unexpected loss to UNLV at home, a less than expected loss at home to Utah State, and you combine that with a couple of road losses, and they're just not the same dominant team we're used to seeing. And a lot of their problems tend to stem from their offense. And it hurt them in games that they were way closer than they should have been. Games, at Air Force, both games against San Jose State, where they just didn't have the offense. So San Jose, Wyoming, another San Jose, and Air Force. That's 4 games against teams that you would expect to win by double digits. Now, having a couple of those is nothing to be ashamed of. Every other top team in the conference has those. New Mexico has a loss to San Jose. Utah State struggled against Fresno in really both of their games against them. Struggled at San Jose. Struggled twice against Wyoming. So, there's room to have some poor games, but it's been just way more consistent and way more like attributable to one key problem with the Aztecs is their offense generally isn't enough to get them way ahead of teams that they should be way ahead of. It's enough to keep them within range of literally any team in the country. We're talking, Houston kept them in range of Houston. That game ends 73-70 in overtime. So San Diego State can keep basically any team down offensively, and so they only have to score 65 points for it to be a close game. The problem is that they seemingly can't score more than 65 in way too many of their games. I looked at how many times have they scored 70 or more points in conference play. So they've played how many conference games so far? 15. They've scored 70 in 4 of those. 2 of those were against Fresno State. And the other was San Jose, I believe. So they scored 80 a couple of times against Fresno, one of the worst defenses in the conference, and probably one of the worst matchups for the Aztecs, who have the athleticism to keep up with Fresno and just more size. And then they scored 76 at Boise State, which is genuinely good for them. Like, Boise has one of the better defenses in the conference, and you score 76 at their place. That is a commendable thing. But all of their other games, home, away, and mind you, I'm not including the Air Force game where they won 77-76 because that's another overtime game. They were in the 60s in regulation.
They did score 75 against Colorado State.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's correct. Oh, I totally missed that one. So that one's at home. So the other thing I noticed is that on the road, like at home, they have, as you mentioned, they've done it a few times, and even in neutral sites, they've scored in the 70s. But on the road, again, excluding Air Force as an overtime game where they're in the 60s in regulation, they do have the 80-point game at Fresno, and then they have the 76-point game at Boise. Of course, that game at Boise was back in early January, just after the turn of the new year. This Aztec team has really struggled to score points in just about every game. They do have their breakout games offensively. The Colorado State game you mentioned, and then just barely their most recent game, they scored 83 against Fresno. But by and large, this is a team that has struggled on offense. So they'll be close in any game they play. I think they've been blown out like twice this year, depending on what your definition of blowout is. 62-48 against New Mexico, 80-67 against Gonzaga. They lost by 10 to Oregon. I don't know if that counts as a blowout or not. I don't know where you draw the line there exactly, but they've had very few games where they just truly get blown out, where somebody just scores a ton and then San Diego State can't keep up. But to be honest, that's exactly what the Aggies really need to be trying to do in this game is get out in front early and make San Diego State chase them.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's kind of what happened in there the last time that they met. Utah State was, it was kind of a back and forth game. Maybe not quite so much to that degree.
Yeah, because the Aztecs got out a decent lead, especially at halftime, because they were up 43, 32, I think, at halftime.
Yeah.
But the Aggies really came out hot at the start of the second half, and then finished the game, strong enough to get that win. But you'd really want to have the opposite, because obviously the Aggies are kind of good enough to have that, where the Aggies have the best offense in the conference. You're going up against the best defense, and good offense can beat good defense, or great offense can beat great defense, because these are both like top 15 offense/defense. If the Aggies can jump out ahead, like say they get that 20-11 lead, I know San Diego State has had games in which they just shut down the opponent, where they go on like 18-0 runs, but those were against Wyoming, Fresno State,
San Jose.
Like, could they do it to the Aggies? Sure. It's not like the Aggies are immune from cold spells or immune from good defense. But if they're playing at like at least 85-90% of the offense they've been playing, the last, couple of weeks, essentially, I don't know if San Diego State can really shut down the Aggies. Because, they scored 89 against Fresno State, then 93 against Colorado State, 79 against, on the road against the New Mexico team that had been holding teams in the 60s with a fast-paced offense. High possession games holding teams in the 60s, and the Aggies put up 79 in their place. And then one of their best offensive ratings ever with 105 points against San Jose. Over the last 4 games, this is an elite offense, top tier. Can San Diego State hold that down? Can they break that trend? These trends eventually end anyway. Utah State's not going to keep playing at this pace on offense. And if they do, we're going to be seeing them playing games in April. But can San Diego State be the one to break that? I'm not sure. And can they do it in Utah State's place? If the Aztecs can't slow the Aggies down and keep them in the 60s, this is an Aggie victory.
Let's not forget, too, that last time these two teams met, Utah State did not have Drake Allen available.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd forgotten. Like, I was going back and looking at the box score and then being like, wait a minute.
Because he hurt his shoulder, and so he wasn't available. It was kind of point guard by committee. But, Dayton Albury had a really nice game for the Aggies. Jordy Barnes played extended minutes, had 7 assists, didn't score, but he had 3 steals as well. So it was a little bit different lineup. And now you look at, what the Aggies are doing now, a little bit different situation where they find themselves. They've zeroed in a little better about who they have and who can actually do some things, and understand their roles a little bit better. But Drake Allen is available, Ian Martinez, Mason Falslev, Dayton Albury. So the strength of this team against San Diego State is in the guard play. But San Diego State does have some bigger guys that can be problematic. Now, Magoon Guath had a lot of attention on him leading up to that game, and he did some things, but he wasn't like super effective in that game. But he is, I don't want to say he's emerged as a star in the league, but he's certainly improved as a player and someone you still have to take notice of.
Yeah, so one thing that I was looking at was how he was doing to start the season kind of before facing the Aggies and what he's done since. And there's a bit of a jump for him because, like, before he played the Aggies, he was like this intriguing but, inconsistent, contributor. I think he'd had, like, a big game to that point. Yeah, he had a 24-point game against San Jose State. Or was that later? This game log is out of order. I'm pretty sure he'd had at least one really solid game before facing the Aggies. But it was a consistent stream of single-digit scoring, occasional double-digit rebounding. He was getting tons of blocks. He was averaging like 3.5 blocks a game to that point, although he's slowed down a bit as people have figured out, maybe don't go straight at him because he'll block you.
Right.
And once teams figure that out, your block numbers tend to go down. But so these were his numbers. Just a quick look at his numbers before facing the Aggies. He was averaging 23 minutes per game, so a relatively low minute starting big. And he was averaging 7.3 points, 3.8 rebounds. I mentioned 3.4 blocks. He was shooting 45% from the field. Some of that was he shoots 3-pointers. He was taking about 1 or 2 per game, and he was hitting well from outside. That kind of dragged his percentage down. But even then, like as a center, field goal percentage below 50, even when you're a 3-point shooter, not the greatest look. But since then, and I'm including the Utah State game in this, so since and including that game against Utah State, he's been averaging 28 minutes per game. So he's gone from, low starter minutes to pretty much average starter minutes. And he's averaging just a hair under 10 points per game. He's averaging 6.6 rebounds per game, 2.2 blocks. I mentioned, like, people figured out not to go straight at him, so his block numbers decrease. But he's up to 54.7% shooting from the field. And he had a 4-game stretch in late January, early February. They were games against like San Jose, I think Fresno was one of them. So Nevada and others, so like not the best opponents, but still over a 4-game stretch, he was averaging 17 points, 10 rebounds, and shooting 63% from the field. So he's gotten better. since the Aggies last faced him. He's improved his game. He's shooting more efficiently from the field. I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I'd really call him a star. He's capable of having these high-impact games, but there are just a lot of games where he's not as much of an impact, where he's not scoring a ton. He can still get a decent number of blocks, but you see where he scores 7 points against San Jose. He did have 14 against Fresno, only 8 points against Boise State. But, of course, his biggest impact in that Boise State game was the 6 blocks, although he also had 7 turnovers. So, there are serious ups and downs with Magoo-Nguath. Can you catch him on a night, or can the Aggies make sure that he ends up not having a big impact, not playing those volume minutes with that kind of impact, force the Aztecs to play a little bit smaller? And I think that'd be absolutely massive, because while San Diego State has the highest block percentage in the country, Magoo-Nguath is responsible for half of their blocks, literally half of their blocks. Miles Byrd is the only one who averages more than 0.5 per game aside from Nguath on their team. He averages 1, so he's a pretty good shot blocking wing. But Magoo-Nguath at 2.7 blocks per game is responsible for their entire rim protection. So if he's not on the court, you can see the Aggies really attack the rim in a number of different ways. Albury, Martinez, slashing to the rim, getting guys like Aubin and Carson in the pick and roll. So making sure that Nguath doesn't have a big game, I wouldn't call it the key focus, but it's certainly an important one.
Yeah, and just
should say it's not the number one focus, but it is
a focus.
A focus.
Yeah, and some of the other guys to be aware of. Nick Boyd is he definitely is somebody to be mindful of. Here's a guy that he put up 24 in their blowout win against Boise. He put up 19 in their game against Fresno, and they had a blowout game there. He's a guy who can score and rebound, share the ball, can do a lot of different things to help them, and is a big part of who they are and what they try to do. And Miles Byrd is the other one who can be a big contributor for this San Diego State team is really all about. Really, it comes down to those 3 guys, but Magoo-Nguath, Miles Byrd, and Nick Boyd. But they do have other guys who can contribute, sometimes in bunches, even though those bunches maybe only be 4 to 6 to 8 points. It's when they happen that it's kind of difficult to try to kind of manage, where is that extra scoring coming from? Because they're not known to be a great scoring team, but when they do have, one of these, I call them a fringe guy, start getting buckets, then that starts to be problematic and keeps them in a game that maybe they shouldn't be.
Yeah, if you're letting these guys have efficient games, because the key to beating San Diego State is simply to just, this sounds really dumb to say, but I'll try and make it sound smarter in a second, but you just got to outscore them in the sense that they're going to hold you way below your scoring average.
Right.
But they have a difficulty, again, it sounds dumb to say because it's the whole dang point of basketball, but they have problems outscoring teams. Just because they don't have enough of an offensive punch. They do play a bit of a slower game, but they are also one of the lesser efficient teams in the country. They rank 277th in field goal percentage. They're 223rd in three-point percentage. They're 295th in free throw percentage. Their leading scorers, Miles Byrd and Nick Boyd, Byrd shoots under 40% on the season, and Boyd barely shoots over 40%. A lot of their, fringe guys, Wayne McKinney, he shoots under 40%. Taj DeGorville, he shoots under 40% from the field. BJ Davis, he's one of their highest, I think he's their highest field goal percentage guy on the perimeter, and he shoots 42%. 43 if you round up from 42.5. So, this is a team full of guys who are, at their average, inefficient. But they are all good Division I basketball players. I mean, set aside the fact that these guys captain one of the best defenses in the dang country. They are all dang good at defense for whatever their offensive skills are worth. But you can also see them, like, at times, and especially if they feed off their defense, these are teams that have gone on these big, long runs, 18-0, 20-0, 15-0. Guys that can get going. Miles Byrd, mind you, he's young. He's a sophomore. There's room for him to grow, and he can get way better, and he can go out there and hit shots. So if you're letting them get hot, you can end up having yourselves a heck of a time, because then suddenly you're not dealing with a team that'll hold you below their average, but they struggle to get to 65. You're dealing with a team that is capable of holding anyone to the 60s, and if they're on offense, they're capable of scoring into the 70s and 80s. And at that point, San Diego State just becomes unstoppable. So if you let their offense get rolling and get efficient, you are in deep crap.
Right, yeah, you can't let these guys get rhythm, right? You can't let some of these guys start to feel like they can come into the spectrum and play with some confidence. This team doesn't have a gamer like some of their rosters have had over the years. So this is a team that grinds you defensively, and then a couple of guys will make some shots, and we'll try to get some offense going. In the years past, San Diego State has always been known as a great defensive team, but somewhere on the roster, they've had a gamer. This roster, I don't think they have a gamer, but they have guys who can contribute. And if you let those guys who can contribute start to feel like they might be a gamer for one night, you're in trouble. And so that's what Utah State has to kind of ward off and not allow to get happening. The last time that they met, Utah State was trailing these guys for most of the game. And then offensively, Aggies were able to hang in there and start making more shots and eventually overcome San Diego State in the closing minute. This game, it can't be that close. Not that I'm afraid of San Diego State figuring out how to score well in the clutch, but this is a team that has proven over multiple occasions in the last month and a half, that even though they're down, they're not out. And so you can't allow them that glimmer of hope. If you can get some separation, man, you got to shut the door on them. You can't let them feel like they can come back on you, because they've proven to themselves over multiple occasions that they can, and they'll still try to do it.
Yeah, despite the fact that they've proven they can come from behind and they can be successful in rallying from down, I feel like the Aggies are much better equipped to end up beating them if they can get San Diego State to try and chase them. Because San Diego State can find ways to chase Air Force. They can find ways to chase San Jose, chase these teams that don't have as great a defense as the Aggies. Mind you, the Aggies aren't elite on defense, but they have a better defense and also a more confounding defense for a young team. They may not be able to handle it quite as well. They did have 14 turnovers in the last game against the Aggies and just really struggled to shoot from pretty much anywhere on the field. So I feel like if the Aggies are able to kind of flip the script from that last game where San Diego State got the early advantage, if the Aggies get the early advantage, they can keep their foot on the pedal. They kind of showed the ability to do that in the game against San Jose. And if they can kind of do that, again, you're not going to score 105 against San Diego State, but kind of the equivalent of that is if you can score in the 80s. Like if you can score in the mid 70s to high 80s, like that is basically, I don't want to say this for sure, but that's essentially game over territory for San Diego State. Because I don't see them being capable of scoring that much unless they just have an all-time offensive night for this squad. They would have to have guys like Miles Byrd have a career night. Magoon Guath would just have to go nuts inside the paint, which I don't think he has the strength to do that just yet. Like Aubin actually outweighs Magoon Guath, at least by maybe I should double check the weight listing there, because the one weight listing I saw him was 190 pounds. And even Aubin Gadarazzi outweighs him there. Oh, they got him at 205. Still, there's a Aubin still outweighs him.
Yeah, there's still a size advantage, at least in
and
weight and just ability to hold your own. And that was a bit of a concern, if I remember correctly, that Utah State looked like they had a physical advantage, but they were still pushed around more than I would have liked in that game at San Diego.
Yeah, and I think that just comes from, even though San Diego State isn't actually like a big and bulky team, they play. Like, you do have Jerrod Coleman-Jones, who is a big physical body. And you've got, they do have some guys with more length, but they play super physical, and they play a disciplined physical. But even then, the Aggies ended up only allowing 8 offensive rebounds. They did get out-rebounded, but it's not like they were getting absolutely bullied out there. They were mostly holding their own, enough to get away with it. And that's the key there. If they can rebound and play physical at a similar level, turn the ball over a little less, because they actually had, mentioned San Diego State had 14 turnovers. The Aggies had 15. So turn the ball over a little less on offense to give your offense a little room to breathe. Rebound about as effectively as you did the last one. You may get out-rebounded by 2 or 3 or 4, but as long as you're not giving up like 35, 40 rebounds and like 10, 15 offensive rebounds, then the Aggies are going to have every chance to shut down the Aztecs. As I mentioned, they tend to be a very inefficient team. They shoot poorly from the field. One way they make up for that, to have a somewhat decent offense, Ken Palm actually ranks them like the top 150 actually top 130 in offensive efficiency. The reason is because they give themselves a ton of second chances. They're first in the conference in offensive rebounding percentage, and I think they're like 129th in offensive rebounding percentage in the country. So like, they can get offensive rebounding opportunities. They can go out there, give themselves second chances, and they've been doing better in conference play against Mountain West opponents. So kind of a bit of scatterbrain there. I don't know if I can wrap that up. But.
Well, yeah, really it boils down to, this is going to be strength on strength. Yeah. San Diego State, one of the top defenses in the country. I mean, according to ESPN BPI, they are the 11th best defense in the country in their defensive efficiency. Utah State, according to the same metric, 17th in the country in offensive efficiency. So you've got a team that can get out and score versus a team that will grind you and make it tough for anything to get through. But the way Utah State's been playing lately, I feel better about this team. The Aggies and how they, and especially this is a game at home, that's going to help. Where your guys on the fringe or your rotation guys, they always tend to play better when you're at home. Now, when they played San Diego State the first time, it was a Tucker Anderson game. Like, he had been a quiet part of the roster to that point, and then he had a breakout game. And this is somebody he's kind of been in and out of how effective he can be for the Aggies. This would be another one where they would need him to play a large role because of his size and his length and his shooting ability, just for that offensive output that San Diego State would struggle to keep up with.
Yeah, you do need those kind of performances from a guy like Tucker, especially because he may end up having to defend inside against guys like, not necessarily like mano-a-mano post defense, but like facing guys in the middle of the court, Bird, maybe even Agun Guath every now and again, Nick Boyd. Like, he's going to have to face off against those guys, keep up with him, and use his length, which he's done fairly well on defense to use his length. He's been snagging a block here and there in a lot of these recent games and playing some good defense, bothering some guys. His shot hadn't been falling except for last time out. He did pretty well there. But, yeah, you're going to need good production out of him there. And just all these guys. Like, if Ian and Mason kind of do their thing where they've been on in the last few games, that could be enough to win this game. Like, if both of them score, if they combine for like high 30s, low 40s points, that'd probably be enough to win. But the thing that could turn this from a close, grinded out, not sure if you're going to win kind of game to a comfortable win, mind you, a comfortable win against the Aztecs with how low scoring it can be is like 6 points.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 to 8 points.
Yeah, and so the thing that would turn it from this close 1 point, last time it came down to a Tucker Anderson game-winning shot, if they got that once again from him, and you also got your contributions from Ian or Mason, or if it's not Tucker, then Drake, who's obviously going to be in this one, and as opposed to not being out there last time, this guy averages 8 points a game. You're going to have him back in the lineup along with Dayton Albury, who's playing better now than he was then.
Yes.
Generally speaking. So I think there's several different things that can help the Aggies. They're going to get a boost to their offense just by having Drake Allen, and they're playing better than they have on offense basically since the first 3 games of the season when they were averaging 100 points per game. So there's every indication that if all these trends keep going, the Aggies should win this one just by virtue of San Diego State just not having enough offense to, take advantage of their defense, holding an Aggies offense that's been averaging like 89 points per game over the last 4 games. They're going to hold the Aggies into the 70s. Like, that's going to happen. But holding the Aggies in the 70s isn't going to be enough for the Aztecs. So I think that's where you have to be really confident about this game, that the Aggies can go out there and dominate because they're playing better than they have on offense. And unless San Diego State just has that, season best offensive performance, it can just be a struggle for them. But of course, the Aggies need to go out there and make sure that San Diego State doesn't have that.
Yeah, and it really may be, the guard play. I think Utah State has an advantage there, but what happens in the post? What happens with Akano and Albury and Gadarazzi and Templin? Do those guys get into foul trouble? Do they get gun shy if they get blocked early? Or do they not let that bother them and have short memories and continue to attack and try to, hold their own down there in that post? So I'm with you. I think Utah State just has a little bit more firepower. Well, probably has a lot more firepower, to be honest. They have a lot more firepower. But it's the question is, how much does San Diego State limit that? What level of success do they have in slowing down the Aggies? USU should still win this game, and I would put it at a 4 to 5 point margin, probably more 5 point margin, where I feel comfortable. Where if I were to guess and give a score, I would say the Aggies would win by 5.
Yeah, when I'm looking at kind of the computer metric score predictions, they're all pretty much Aggies, just about mid-70s, San Diego State high 60s. For instance, EvanMia.com's got the Aggies 73.4 to 70 for the Aztecs. Hazometrics has the Aggies at 73.29, San Diego State 69.34. I think Ken Palm, he doesn't have decimal places, but I think he has a 74.70. So, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Aggies in the low, maybe mid-70s, and Aztecs in the high 60s, maybe low 70s.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of that's what the expectation could be, but obviously we're going to see this game happen in front of us on Saturday, and we'll see if those predictions are worth anything.
Yeah, game tips off at 6, and pregame coverage on our sister station, KVNU. That'll start at 5 with KVNU game day coverage, and game will start at 6. And then if you can't make it to the game, it will be a nationally broadcast game on CBS Sports Network, part of a doubleheader that evening with Colorado State at UNLV for the nightcap. But there's the number of games on the Mountain West schedule on Saturday. Very busy Saturday for the Mountain West. Fresno State's at Air Force at 1. Battle for the bottom right now.
This is basically like Air Force's last chance, it feels like, to get one win in conference play, because otherwise they're in trouble.
Yeah.
I don't know if they face, because I know Utah State's it's their last opponent in regular season, but yeesh, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull off. Are they going to go the 0 for 20, first ever 0 for 20 in Mountain West history?
Ooh, man, they're on their way.
First and last, really.
Then at 2, it's San Jose State at Wyoming. Both teams are 5-11, so this is about seeding, really, for what happens in the Mountain West tournament, though it may ultimately not matter. There's still a few games left, but
they're still both first round teams.
It's just who do you face. Then at 4 on FS1, Boise State at Nevada, and then at 6 o'clock it's Aggies and the Aztecs, and then at 8 it's Colorado State at UNLV, and so, I mean, if we're looking at this for the best of the conference, for the good of the conference, then Boise State and Colorado State need to win their games.
Yeah.
Utah State needs to win its game. And then it really doesn't matter with Fresno State, San Jose, Wyoming.
Yeah,
any
none
of
of
those
that really
other games
matters.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you're looking, I guess, were you talking best for the conference, right?
Yeah.
Boise, Colorado, and with Utah State, San Diego State, it's just there's a positive and negative.
Right.
So, but either way, you're not really getting hurt. If you're talking about for the good of the Aggies, I would probably line this up. Obviously, Utah State winning their game, but I'd go Nevada UNLV winning. You want them to win. Obviously,
just gives a little bit more separation in the standings.
Yeah, separation in the standings, especially with the UNLV Colorado State, but also with UNLV being one of the Aggies' losses. That's another thing. You want them to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, that's true.
And the separation, obviously. The Nevada Boise is a little thinner there, where it's just mainly like trying to get Nevada as close back to that quad one win as you can.
Which they are right now.
Yeah, which they are. So like you want them to stay there. Obviously, it does hurt Boise, but Boise's not falling out of that quad one territory anytime soon. They're still, top 50 or just outside the top 50?
Boise is right now 45.
Yeah, 45. So they're inside the top 50. They have to drop all the way to 75 for this upcoming road Boise game to not be a quad one game. So if you're looking for the rooting guide for this weekend, Aggies, obviously, depending on how much pity you have for the Falcons, you might root for them. I'd personally root for Wyoming because I really like Sundance Wicks, although Josh Aduja, pick one. Either way, that should just be a fun game in general. But then root for Nevada and UNLV. Root for the Nevada schools this weekend.
There you go. It's your rooting guide.
Yeah.
From the
Jason's
Full Court Press.
rooting guide.
Before we wrap up the podcast today, let's look at what's going on with high school sports. The quarterfinal round took place Thursday, a day full of basketball games. Started in the morning, went all day into the evening, and we had 5 teams that were in action between girls and boys basketball down at Southern Utah University. 3 teams advanced. Unfortunately, 2 teams weren't able to do it. One team had a sizable lead in the fourth quarter, but sadly they were not able to hang on. That was Ridgeline boys basketball. They had, I think it was a 16-point lead with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They ended up losing the game in overtime. Part of that was just Hurricane just got hot. Ridgeline also, low. Their point guard got into foul trouble. Eventually fouls out of the game with a couple of minutes to go, and they just, the Riverhawks just looked like they really were struggling with how to get the ball up the court and initiate their offense, and they just went stone cold. They only scored 3 points in the fourth quarter, and then Pinocchi, one of their main guys, horrific injury, sadly. Looked like a really bad injury. I don't know the details of it, but it did not look good. They put an air cast on him, had to be carted off the floor. It was not pretty. And you could tell that just took the wind out of their sails completely. And sometimes when a player goes down for getting fouled out or injury, you can see a team rally around them. But Ridgeline was already dealing with one of their guys out with injury. And then your leading scorer and your point guard fouls out. And then one of your other top guys gets a terrible injury, just coming down with a rebound and lands on a guy's foot. It just was too much for Ridgeline to overcome. And unfortunately, the Riverhawks, they're out. And the number 3 team in the conference is out.
Yeah, it's really disappointing to have that be the end, because it just takes away, and it takes away from Hurricane too, where they were really good in that game, obviously, and you don't want to chalk it up to them getting lucky because if some guy fouls out, some other guy gets injured, and there was another guy who's already not playing, and that's unfortunately sometimes the ugly side of the sport. It's an unavoidable one. Sometimes these injuries happen. Saying that doesn't make it any easier, because when it happens to you, and we've had multiple guys get injured this year for Region 11 teams. It happened last year too. It was a preseason player of the year caliber guy, had his career end, game into the season for Skyview. So really, you can't put into words how unfortunate and sad that kind of situation is, where you have that happen, and then obviously on top of that, have your a run end, especially for a team as promising and as Ridgeline. They're the only team this year to have defeated Green Canyon. To this point, still, they may end the season as the only team to have defeated Green Canyon, and to not maybe get that potentially last game against them, potentially in the championship game if they'd have made it all the way. It's just one of those woulda, coulda, shoulda type situations with sports where it's like, man, really wish we would have had that.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate. They'd had the lead. Hurricane ties the game on a deep three, but Ridgeline has one last possession in regulation, and they put up a couple shots, got offensive rebounds, and had multiple opportunities to win the game in the final seconds, but it just wouldn't go in, and eventually they lose. But you mentioned Green Canyon. They played earlier in the day as well, and they took it to Timpanogos, 64-51. Won that one going away. It was a team effort. Jude Haig had a solid game, but there were several other guys who contributed and played really well. So Green Canyon advances. They're in the semifinals, taking on Dixie, and then the other pairing is Payson and Hurricane. Payson, the number 2 team in the seeding, Hurricane number 6, Dixie number 4 in the seeding for boys basketball. For girls basketball, Mountain Crest had the unenviable challenge of taking on undefeated Snow Canyon. Didn't go very well for the Mustangs. They've punched above their weight to get to where they were as a 10 seed, but eventually they ran into the buzzsaw, which is Snow Canyon, and lost 64-25. Then we had 3 girls teams in action, actually, and then number 6, Skyview, they were taking on number 3, Payson, and they punched above their weight. They were able to succeed, and they did it pretty convincingly, and were in control the entire game and won 58-47. So they advanced to the semifinals. And then the other Region 11 girls basketball team in action, number 1 Ridgeline versus number 8 Cedar. Ridgeline won that one 52-32, though it did, watching that one, it looked like Emily Skinner must be battling something. She didn't look like she was feeling very good, under the weather. It didn't look like she had a lot of energy, but she still led the team in scoring and still contributed and put the team on her back. But Ridgeline advances, so they will face Dixie, and Dixie upset Provo in the quarterfinals, 66-63. So be number 1 Ridgeline versus number 12 Dixie, number 2 Snow Canyon versus number 6 Skyview.
And Dixie's on 2 straight upsets. They beat 5 seed Cottonwood, and then they beat 4 seed Provo. I don't know if beating 1 seed Ridgeline is in the cards for them, but it's a pretty solid girls basketball program down there. Then obviously Skyview looking at Snow Canyon. Can they get another upset after a pretty solid win over Payson? Not the most massive upset, a 3 versus a 6, but now an undefeated Snow Canyon team. There's 2 clear-cut best teams in the state in 4A, and it's Ridgeline and Snow Canyon. Can the Bobcats get one there? They've got some really solid players. They've got a star caliber player. Can they put it all together? They've definitely had it in the playoffs, where they whipped up on Westfield and then they controlled the entire game against a very good Payson team. So they're playing about as well as they've played the entire year. They picked a pretty good time to do it. Can they do the same against Snow Canyon, who's still dominant as ever?
Yes. So I know we're recording this podcast before these games take place, but by chance you tune in and want to check in on any of these games.
Whatever happens, I predicted it. I just may not have said it on air.
Ridgeline Dixie, 2:30 on 104.5 The Ranch. Skyview versus Snow Canyon on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan. And in boys basketball, Green Canyon versus Dixie at 5:50 on 100.9 Light FM. So that's your rundown. And then the championship games will be tomorrow. The boys' championship game, if Green Canyon advances, they play at 5:30. And if Ridgeline or Skyview advance, they will face each other at 3. So girls will play first at 3 o'clock, and then the boys will be later at 5:30. And if any local teams do advance, we'll have those games on local radio and links where you can follow them online as well. So let's do this. Jason, you got a chance to go up and visit with the coach. And let's hear what Coach Calhoun has to say about Utah State and San Diego State squaring off in the Spectrum on Saturday night.
All right, guess big game. San Diego State, a rematch, obviously, of an exciting game from seems like forever ago, but finally get to face a quality San Diego State team once again.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to learn from that first encounter. We just made one more shot than them. They've been on a tear. Really, really good team. Obviously, historically, just a national brand. Built on toughness, defense. I think Guath is playing as good as anybody in the country. One of the most versatile players out there. At any position really. But they got a really, really good team, and we'll have to be ready to roll.
It seemed like he's gotten better as a season. Obviously, he's a freshman, but I couldn't really remember him doing a whole lot against you guys. I mean, I'm sure he did, but the last little while I've been watching him, he's really been playing well. Yeah,
you got to really credit first and foremost him, but also their coaching staff of developing him. They redshirted him, and now if you look at some NBA draft boards, potential first-round pick. So he's 7 foot, he can make threes, one of the best, if not the best shot blocker in the country, can guard pick and rolls, can handle the ball. He's a guy that's probably improved more than anybody in the country.
So obviously they have one of the best defenses in the country. What are the things that really make them tricky to score on? 'Cause it doesn't seem like anybody can put more than 70 on them in any given game.
Yeah, I think I looked at it today. I think on the road, and there's 7 road games, I think they've only given up 64 points a game or something like that. The numbers are, astonishing. So they're going to be in every game because of their defense. They're physical on the ball. One of the best shot blocking team in the country. Positional size, toughness, depth this year. Their bigs are big. They're strong. They hound you in full court situations. So, there's a lot to love about their defense. There's no doubt about it.
A lot of comparisons between Utah State and San Diego State in a way that seems like a lot of games where they've gotten down, come back and won. But then you guys put one of your best games together. They just put one of their best games together from start to finish against Fresno State.
Yeah, they've been on a incredible tear in the second half of games. If you look at their last really 5 to 8 games, they go on incredible runs, which is led by live ball turnovers. You can't do that against them. Just incredible ability to stop you and get out and score and punish you. So you got to value possessions. Ball security, live ball turnovers are going to be critical. Execution, right? If you have a shot, you got to take it. You got to get out and try to create some transition baskets, right? The ability to get out and get step-in threes or get layups are going to be critical.
So your team's been playing about the best offense they've played maybe since the first handful of games when you were averaging about 100. What things need to carry over from these last few games where we've had a lot of success against San Diego State team? It's obviously a lot harder to score against.
Yeah, I would say defense, Jason. It's not really even the offense. Both sides got to go hand in hand. So the ability to create turnovers and get out and get some runs. I mean, that's what we did last game. Steal the ball, get out and run, and defensive rebounding. You got to get those stops so you can get easy baskets. I think that's when our offense is at its best.
How have they responded after such a blowout win? I mean, sometimes you guys have responded really well after losses. How have they responded after such a big win?
Yeah, Sean, we talked about that. You have to be able to respond in good times and respond in bad times, right? You got to stay even keeled this time of year. You can't overreact to a possession or a free throw or, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of basketball left. There's 160 minutes left in the regular season. There's going to be a ton of possessions throughout those games that will have big impacts on the game. So hopefully our guys have a mindset of, hey, we're at home. We've got to play well at home. We're going to have our fans, our hoops. We're, used to this building. But the reality of it is that the teams that execute and play with tremendous toughness will win this time of year.
Mentioned defensive rebounding. The Aztecs are, I think, the best offensive rebounding team, leading by percentages of rebounds. Like, how much emphasis has to go into keeping these guys off the glass, which you guys were relatively successful in the first matchup between you guys?
I think both sides are going to be critical, right? If you look at their defensive numbers, defensive rebounding, and also their fouling, we have to take advantage of those two things, right? So you got to make free throws and you got to get to the offensive glass. We certainly have to close possessions with hard box outs.
Talked about Guath, but let's talk about Boyd and Bird, their two guards. really solid and consistent throughout the season.
Yeah, good players. They really work well together. A lot of respect for their backcourt. Really, a lot of respect for their team. They're young. I mean, if Coach can convince these kids to all come back, I told them when I saw them there, a while back, that I think they can win a national championship or be in the conversation. With all the different obstacles nowadays, that's easier said than done. But their program speaks for itself, and those two guards do a tremendous job of playing off one another. Boyd has winning DNA from Florida Atlantic. The kid's a winner. Bird has been in Coach's system, Coach Dutcher's system. He knows what it looks like day in and day out. He's a big shot maker, shot taker, and he's 6'5", 6'6", so he's got good size for a two guard.
So San Diego State at times, they have an elite defense, but at times their offense kind of struggles to keep up. They've been inefficient at times. How do you try and make sure these guys stay down and don't have one of their better offensive games, especially since they just had a really good one against Fresno?
I think we have to guard the ball. I mean, you got to keep people in front. You got to stay out of rotations, whatever defense we're playing. We've got to do a good job of providing some support on the ball with our gap defense. Being good in our closeouts, being good in our different coverages, whatever coverage we're in pick and rolls and that sort of thing, and do a really good job of keeping the ball in front. I think is the number one key.
I got one more. You didn't have Drake last time in this game. Just how big is it to have him back as another piece?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Drake's been on a tear himself. I think he's been awesome the last month and a half. Just his presence out there, athleticism, getting to the rim, handling the ball, passes on time, on target, certainly going to help, no doubt.